Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. I'll tell you, let's go to Kingston, Ontario, and then from there, let's go, let's say, to Russia, and then maybe China today. Is that enough globetrotting for you? Okay, I've got just the guy who's going to help us travel. His name is John Foster, and he's sitting at his computer in Kingston, Ontario, where he's been preparing a bunch of slides to show me of pipelines. This is my pipeline friend. He's a man who knows everything about the geopolitics of oil and gas pipelines. And I tell you, it's really amazing to see how many there are in the world and how many others are being planned or fought over. So the whole issue of where to put a pipeline has enormous implications. So we're going to talk about that today, okay? Hello, John. Nice to see you.
And thank you so much for having me.
It's always fun to talk to you. Good. All right. I'll tell you where I want to go first. I'd like for you, first of all, I think you showed me a picture of something I identified as the U.S. State Department building. Why don't you show us the State Department? Because that is where the hub of all these machinations takes place, right?
Now, let me do that and think perhaps about his nickname of it's in Foggy Bottom, which I think sums it up really quite well as to what diplomats are all about, which is causing a bit of fog.
It's true. That's a certain district of Washington, D.C.
That's correct.
I don't.
Oh, I did it. Good gracious.
Okay, there's the State Department. Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's it. It's this huge place. And what's interesting,
I remember one time standing outside. I can't see where the garage entrance is, but I remember somebody pointed out to me that's Hillary Clinton's car going into the garage. So that's why I recognized that building, because I was looking for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I've been into that building several times because I worked for the World Bank at one time, and so it was a short walk. What interests me to show that slide of a concrete building is that the State Department has well over 100 people working on energy, particularly oil and gas worldwide. That's quite apart from the diplomats abroad they have and the petroleum attaches in certain countries like the United Kingdom. And then there are a bunch of other departments in Washington, all having some focus or other on energy. The CIA, I think of, Department of Energy, Commerce Department, and so forth. So the US has a terrific focus on this particular sector because energy is, when it's oil, is fungible with money, power. And I think in Ottawa, when I worked there, about 3 people worked on energy. It was pretty minimal. They relied on the states, on Washington, and they relied on the International Energy Agency in Paris, which is this international agency of which Western countries, the OECD countries, are members. And I suspect it's the same today. Now, you did ask me, however, to move into Russia, so I better do that. What was interesting to me is that, as we see at the Globe and Mail and whatnot, there's this huge game going on now between the United States and Canada backing it up, NATO backing it up, vis-a-vis Russia and China. The thing about Russia is that it has the world's largest reserves of natural gas. It's depending how you measure these things, the world's largest exporter of gas and the largest exporter of oil. And much of that goes to Europe, but increasingly, as I'll show another slide, it goes to China.
I would have thought that oil and gas would come from the same location, but I don't see that they do, except with one up there, something called Yamalo-Nenetsk. They seem to be coming from that point, but otherwise, the oil and gas seem to be coming from different places, and mostly toward the western part of Russia, not the east. Is that the case? I assumed that a lot of their oil and gas would be coming from Siberia.
So yes, the Yamal Peninsula is in northwest Siberia, and it has enormous gas reserves, some of the biggest in the world. And in this map, which is a bit old, you see the traditional routes to Europe, and the two red lines going more or less from right to left. And the upper one goes through Belarus and Poland, and the lower one goes through Ukraine. I've got better maps on that to illustrate. As regards another aspect, which is the East Siberia, there are now new lines, which I'll show a map of, from Yamal, from East Siberia into eastern China, and likewise from Yamal is being planned into China. So that means there's a huge gas field of Yamal will then be able to move gas in two directions, either Europe or China, actually both. So the other, what do the Americans think about this in this big game? Here's LNG, and Trump called it freedom gas. So it sounds like freedom fries, and instead of French fries, it just goes back to the Iraq War days. So the United States, because of fracking, as you know, has become an enormous producer of gas. And with that, export gas. In fact, I think some of this gas comes up into southwest Ontario and maybe even to Toronto by now, rather than from Alberta. But the US has been looking very much where to export this gas. And since most of the gas fields are down in the Texas, Louisiana area, plus Pennsylvania, the obvious exports would be to Europe, and Europe is the world's second largest gas market after North America. So
and those big dome-like things there.
Yes.
Are those just full of liquefied natural gas sloshing around in there, or?
Well, hopefully not sloshing, but certainly pressurized in there. And chilled. I think you know the game is that it's chilled. I can't give you the proper degrees, but when chilled, the natural gas shrinks to 1/600th of its atmospheric volume, and so this is the way to carry it around as a liquid.
Okay.
And when it gets to the other end, in say Poland, it then is regasified.
Okay, as of now, that's it's a liquid and it's very, very cold.
That's right.
If I touched one of those white things, would it be cold from the outside?
I've not been on board one of these vessels. That's a very interesting thought, isn't it? Would your hand stick to it like with skis in the winter? I hope not.
I would be scared, frankly, to be on that ship, but is that just because I'm neurotic, or would there be reason to be worried?
I think the answer is I'm not aware of any LNG tanker explosions at all. I think they're pretty safe.
It's liquefied natural gas, but my understanding is that natural gas is mostly methane.
Yes.
But is it that everything in there is just methane, or is it also a whole mixture of other gases?
It's the first as you speak. It's all methane.
So they've purified it before they put it in there.
Exactly so, and it knocked out the sulfur too. Since this is gas from fracking to such an extent, fracking is a very environmentally unfriendly business, and for the atmosphere. Now, in Russia, the gas comes traditionally from down, as you saw in the previous map, from the Ural Mountains and up from the Yamal. And traditionally it came through Ukraine, but that was all part of the Soviet Union. It was all integrated. And there were two major ways to bring gas to Europe, Central Europe. One is through Belarus and Poland. and that's called the Yamal gas pipeline. And the other major route is through Ukraine.
And these are all existing pipelines, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been existing since the 1960s, 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
You may recall that at that time, Germany, West Germany, reached out to the Soviet Union to make trade rather than break the Iron Curtain. And so the Germans built the pipes, and the Soviets supplied the gas, also oil. They have one huge oil pipeline to Europe, and it goes through Belarus and Poland.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were able to look inside one of those pipes, I've often wondered what's there. Say if water were running through, either you could have a little bit of water trickling along the bottom of the pipe, or you could have it absolutely pressurized so that the whole tube would be completely contain nothing but the water. Well, I wonder, of course, with gas, that looks a little different, but is it something that is sort of full at all times, or is it something that will ebb and flow like a river might, according to the seasons or something?
Goodness me, I've never thought of these things. The answer is that it doesn't ebb and flow. No, it's pure natural gas that's flowing down this line. Now, if in a case of an oil pipeline, I do know that it's possible to batch the oils, so you have oils of different quality going through the pipeline with a little block between them. That's what we put in to separate them. And you could even send refined fuel oil down that way, or refined diesel oil down that way. And if I understand rightly, that's what happens in the case of the Trans Mountain Pipeline that's currently already built from Alberta to British Columbia.
So now every so often, some distance apart, there must be a pump to make the stuff continue through, right?
Correct. That's right. Compressor pumps.
How far apart are these pumps?
I don't know. If I would imagine every 200 kilometers, but I'm just guessing.
Oh yeah. And if there's a leak, how do they know?
You'll push me. I don't know, but they have sensors on the pipelines. That's as far as I know.
Okay.
But this is an interesting slide, Meta. It's the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, and it's not very much in our newspapers. There have been a few references in the Globe and Mail I spotted this past week because of the Belarus affair.
Now, hold on. It's going through some waterway. Tell me about, I can't visualize. Is that the North? That's not the North Sea. What do you call that water?
Yes, this is the Baltic Sea.
The Baltic Sea. Okay.
Separating, as you see, Scandinavia from Central Europe and Eastern Europe. Now, the Russians' relationships with Ukraine, as we know, are abysmal. And clearly the two countries are hot from a Russian point of view, which is what we have to think of it here. Ukraine is a hostile country. Now, Ukraine was a country which, until what I'm going to talk about this pipeline, it was the traditional way of bringing gas into Europe for decades, plus a second pipeline built, which I showed you through Poland, called Yamal. Now, the Russians have taken the line that, from their point of view, the gas going through Poland, going through Ukraine, is a bottleneck. They could get throttled. Russia, with these enormous amounts of oil and gas that it exports, is highly reliant on petroleum revenues for its export earnings, and also for its central government revenues. And obviously, from its point of view, if the flows of gas were to be cut, it would be this would be a strategic issue and a red line for Russia. At any rate, what they've done is they said we're going to build two new pipelines, two pipeline systems. one going to the north of Ukraine and the other going to the south of Ukraine and that way to Europe. And furthermore, we're going to try and make them go through water. So there's less countries to transit and therefore less political headache. So
and that is that water is considered for the world. I mean, it's not, no country claims to own the Baltic Sea, huh?
The answer to that is across the coastal waters, I suppose that's 12 miles offshore, are territorial waters of each of these countries. But the waters further offshore are typically in the economic exclusive areas of each of these countries. And so to build a pipeline, and the Nord Stream, you see I put up there 2, but Nord Stream 1 is already built, and Nord Stream 2 is 95% built. To build it, it required the permission from each of these countries' governments to meet the environmental considerations, and also then to be certified by international people who do this, that the line is safe and insurable. So on that basis, Nord Stream 1 was built. My understanding is because it's going through it's not going through the territorial waters, but through the economic exclusive zones, that they don't have to pay transit fees to any of the countries involved. Whereas in the case of the lines which currently take gas through Ukraine and then on to Slovakia and so forth, and in the case of the other pipeline going through Poland, yes, they pay and they have to pay transit fees to those governments. In the case of Ukraine, the amount of transit fees we're talking of is about 3 billion with a B US dollars per year. So from the point of view of Ukraine, it's extremely important. It's for a treasury which is bankrupt and a country that's basically bankrupt. So to have gas in the future when these are built, the one's built, the others nearly built, come on stream means that Ukraine is frightened.
So they think that, excuse me, but I'm guessing, they think that once Nord Stream comes on, is functional, that Russia will cut off sending stuff through Ukraine. Is that?
Potentially that could be so.
And is that a realistic concern that indeed the Russians might do it, or are the Russians also in need of Ukraine as or need to export their oil?
The case of oil it goes through Belarus and Poland, so it needs Belarus and Poland to be friendly enough. Obviously, Belarus is under its current government. Obviously, Poland is not friendly, but it's still cooperating. In the case of the gas, which is the big story here, because nobody's building a new oil pipeline, they're building these gas pipelines. In the case of Ukraine is interesting. The relations between Ukraine and Russia are so bad that the Ukrainians refuse to buy their natural gas for their domestic market. So two markets, domestic market and the transit market. So the gas that goes to other countries through Ukraine. In the case of the domestic market, they refuse to buy the gas directly from the Russians. Instead, they're buying it from Slovakia or I'm not sure which other countries, maybe Belarus in the past. And so it's what they could backhauled into.
Do they have other pipes? It's Russian oil or gas rather that goes, let's say, to Slovakia, and then they go get it from Slovakia, but it's still the same gas.
It's still the same gas, and it costs them more money.
Yeah, and this is just pride, or is it self-defense?
I think it's pride.
Okay.
there's really they need to sober up. It's not happening, and they're being egged on big time by the United States. So the countries so this has become. So after building Nord Stream 1, which came on stream several years ago, it's a joint venture with a Russian company, Gazprom, and four European companies, German and so forth, 50%. So it's not a Russian pipeline as such. It's a Russian-European joint project. The new one, Nord Stream 2, had begun the same way, but the US has put sanctions on the building of this pipeline, and the sanctions have become more and more tough. Poland has put legal barriers in the way of its being built, which I don't really want to have to try to explain. I'll probably do it rather badly. The European partners pulled out and instead became financiers of the pipeline, but in a sense it's still the same thing. And it's now 95, its building had been stopped for a whole year when the US sanctioned the Swiss pipeline vessel, which had stopped work and went away. So that the line under the water languished, and it was this year late last year, that the building had restarted with with what is now 2 Russian vessels which are laying the pipe. One of them that was brought all the way around from Vladivostok, all the way around the Cape of Good Hope of South Africa, all the way up into Europe. Anyhow, it's now laying the pipe. And you were asking about whether the pipeline route goes through any of these countries' waters. The final holdout on for the economic zone was Denmark. Initially, the pipeline was going to be go through Dutch territorial waters, and the Danes could stop that on political grounds, but through the exclusive waters, they can't stop it except on environmental grounds, and it met their environmental requirements. So this pipe is now nearly finished. And what happened last week or so, when Blinken was in Europe, was that at last he admitted that the United States, despite all these sanctions, cannot stop the building of the pipeline. This is extremely angry-making to the Republican Party, particularly Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who of course is a promoter of U.S. LNG, that tanker, to Poland and to Germany, and have been arguing that this pipeline is a threat to European and NATO energy security, and because of NATO, therefore a threat to the United States. And I think Canada goes along with that kind of argument.
Now, how different would Blinken's position be from what had been the Trump administration's position on this? Are they basically aiming toward the same goal, but Blinken is indicating that he's not going to succeed, whereas the Trump people thought they still were hoping they might be able to block it, or what?
Yes, I think your questions are the big questions. We don't know, but I think the guessing is this: that the U.S. and the Democrats at last have thrown in the towel in their opposition to the building of this second pipeline, and probably hoping against hope, and probably doing a fair amount of support to the German Green Party, You may have read that the Greens stand a good chance of gaining the chancellorship of Germany when Merkel retires in September, and there's a change of power. And if the Greens have said that they would stop the pipeline, well, by that time this pipeline will have been built, but they could stop its use, or would they? The thing is that the gas goes not only to Germany, but would go to France because of the people who are backing the pipeline, and to other countries like the Czech Republic and Austria.
Do they have smaller pipelines leading out from this terminus?
This is a non-stop pipeline.
Okay, but I mean, when it gets to Greifswald, what happens to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Good question. The answer is there already. There are two pipelines onshore that are in operation. One goes west to the Netherlands, and the other goes south through southern Germany, close to the Polish border, with spurs that go off into Poland. Although I don't think the Poles are taking any gas. I'm not sure. I don't think so. And to the Czech Republic, and from there it could go down into Austria, which is by Vienna has a huge hub, as they call it, for gas received from Russia through Ukraine.
Okay.
Now, the countries that are opposing this pipeline are, of course, Poland, Ukraine, and the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Britain, and the United States. They've been strongly against it. So leaving outside North America, you can see that Europe is divided on this project.
Okay, now the reason they oppose it is they still have pipelines through their own place, and they want to take a cut. Is that it?
That's their fear. Now, what the Germans are saying is that the market for natural gas is growing and growing and growing, and so there'll be the need for both. Quite how that will work out in practice is another matter. And the argument that is being proposed, put forward by the German government, is that this new gas is needed as a transition fuel before Germany moves further and successfully in a transition to renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation and all that. Bearing in mind that Germany is shutting down its nuclear power stations and shutting down its coal and its lignite, all of which have been enormously big in the supply of the total energy mix to Germany.
Yeah, I mean, they are very bold in doing this, aren't they? I mean, they're going out on a limb because are they going to be technologically able to pull it off?
To pull off the transition in this fashion?
Yeah.
That's the question. So I think that's the big argument, which the major political parties in Germany have been for is for this pipeline, and the German industry and the business people want the pipeline because I suspect they don't trust that the country can switch that fast to lock, stock, and barrel to go green. Now, if the Greens do get into power in September, the question is what will they do about this pipeline? And the answer is if they were to shut it, then it doesn't mean that necessarily Germany would be using less gas as a result. It might mean that more would be supplied from Ukraine, and therefore it's still Russian gas. And so basically, from a Russian point of view, this pipeline system is a strategic diversion from just being reliant upon one transit route. From a German point of view, I guess it has the same benefit. The US, I think, the US game is to weaken Russia. and so anything goes.
Well, I guess, it must be a trade-off between what can you do and what would you like to do to be nasty to your enemy. Because if they would like to shut everything, if some people would like to close down every pipeline they can get onto, then the question is, are they going to freeze in the dark?
That's the issue, isn't it? Like Ontario was told, wasn't it, long ago by Alberta. Yeah. Shall I move on, or
but what's your answer? What's your answer? If you think that if the maximum amount of closure were applied to all of the pipelines that radical politicians would want, what would be the worst thing that would be likely to happen? Would they run really short of fuel? Would they not be able to heat their houses in the winter? What would happen?
Yes, well, I think those things could happen depending upon where. I mean, there's a Canadian story, and that's a completely different matter. We can talk about that. But in Europe, I think, for my taste as an economist, I guess, I see every reason to, from Germany's point of view, to have Nord Stream 2 in place, as it's moving increasingly away from the dirtiest of the fossil fuels and away from nuclear.
Okay, yes, you want to move on, so don't let me hinder you.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to give you a complete slideshow. We were going to have a conversation, but probably that's what's happening.
Well, yeah, we are conversing. Okay, so here we are going down toward Turkey now, huh?
Yes. Now, why Turkey? Question. Well, I said there were two ways of diverting Russian gas into Europe, away from flowing through Ukraine. And we've talked about the northern route through the Baltic Sea, and there's the southern route through the Black Sea. This, you can see that a line in yellow on the right in NOTPEC, the solid one called Blue Stream. That's been in existence some years, since the early 2000s or so, if I recall, and it brings Russian gas into Turkey. Turkey is a big market for natural gas. One reason for that is before that it had been highly reliant upon lignite, as I recall, and in Ankara and thereabouts, fearsomely polluted. So natural gas gives them some leeway. The other thing that Turkey wants to do is to become an energy hub for gas from different directions, and I'll show you that in a moment. But one new pipeline which is now being built, it's shown in Pipelines there, but now it's actually completed. You can see called Turks Stream, and this it goes with Nord Stream, and there's Turks Stream, and it goes from Russia again, very close as you see to Crimea, and it goes to the south, forgive me, to the west, the very western end of Turkey. So it's good for Istanbul. They've built two parallel strings, as they call them, two parallel lines, which comprise Turk Stream. And they've both been finished late last year. One of them is devoted purely to supplying the Turkish market, Istanbul, and the other one goes from Turkey up into Bulgaria. And it was a competition between Bulgaria and Greece as to who was going to cooperate. I think the Greeks got strong-armed by Brussels, meaning the European Commission, and by the United States not to cooperate with Russia in this. So Bulgaria has, and from Bulgaria, a line has now been built which goes up to Serbia, and there's a line across Serbia, and that connects to another line into Hungary. So the gas goes up through the Balkans. There's also a line.
It's going to the west, pretty far.
Yes, basically it goes northwest, up towards Austria.
Okay.
It also goes from Bulgaria up into Romania in a connecting, so-called connector, another pipeline. So lots of pipelines. But what's interesting to me about this matter is not the glory of pipelines as such. It's the geopolitical aspect of all this, because what happens with these pipelines is that they connect countries together physically, but they also connect them economically, and they connect them diplomatically. In other words, when the countries are connected, they have to behave. That was the issue with Ukraine. There's this cooperative relationship with Russia had broken down. Intriguingly to me, the relationship between Germany, France and Germany, to Russia is very good. And Russian gas goes as far as France. The question was whether the US would or could block the Turk Stream construction, working with the European Commission. And the answer, I think, was that Turkey is not a member of the European Commission, European Community, European Union, and that was a very good reason for routing the pipeline across into Turkey, but very close to Southeast Europe. That's my Turk Stream story.
But the Turk Stream story isn't really going to Turkey.
Yeah,
it's going to Bulgaria, right?
Yeah, bear in mind there are two parallel lines.
Yeah, but you've already got the Blue Stream.
They've got Blue Stream, and they've also got two parallel lines within Turk Stream.
Oh.
One feeding the Istanbul market, and the other feeding Southeast Europe.
Oh yeah, okay. I think Turkey, 20 years ago thought it would be part of the EU and everything else.
Right.
And it got rejected. So I think it's cozying up to Putin.
It is, of course, it's still a member of NATO.
But he wanted in the EU. So is this part of their strategic game plan to try to flirt with Russia?
Oh, I think so. Let me come back to this idea of an energy hub. That is where pipelines from different countries come together like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. They come into the center of the hub, and then it gets mixed there and goes out in different directions.
Okay.
The point that in the last 20 years, natural gas has been deregulated in Europe as well as in North America, meaning that instead of being a cost of service plus rate of return, all regulated through a national energy board, the idea instead, because of saying it's a natural monopoly from one source to another, one buyer, now you try. The idea is to have competition between different sources, then going down a common carrier pipeline, and then going to different markets. So Turkey wanted to set itself up as a place where it could trade in gas. So it's got the Russian gas coming in, as you see. There is another pipeline system. I have a slide, but it's not immediately at hand, which would take gas from the Caspian Sea through Turkey. That exists as a pipeline. And it doesn't go through Russia, and then is extended across Turkey, and then is still being built there. And then we'll go across Greece into Italy. And that's being built, and it's called the Southern Gas Corridor.
So is that where's the gas coming from? Russia?
It bypasses Russia, and it does not carry Russian gas.
So where are they getting it? Where's the gas in the ground?
Azerbaijan.
Oh, okay.
Which is again it's on the Caspian, and it's a traditional source of gas since the 19th century. And oil. It's one of the original places for commercial oil in Europe. So the people behind that pipeline is very much promoted by the United States and Britain, and it has a variety of owners as this pipeline goes across these different countries. but a common ownership is British Petroleum, BP. And so you can imagine this is the darling of, of the British and also of NATO. And they would like to see this gas coming into Europe as opposed to Turk Stream, which they tried to block from happening. And a predecessor pipeline to Turk Stream, in fact, was blocked. The Bulgarians were told in no uncertain terms by the US to back off. Anyhow, things change, and Bulgaria is now part of the system.
Okay. Okay.
Now, what's interesting to me is I don't know how you feel about this. The third, we've talked about the United States and Russia. Russia, of course, has moved enormously into the arms of China, as the two countries are contained by NATO and by the United States. And China has, from having been 20 years ago self-sufficient in oil, now is the world's largest oil importer. And most of it comes from the Middle East. And in coming to the Middle East, it has to go down the Persian Gulf, and then it has to go all the way down by Singapore, Malaysia, and up through the Straits of Malacca there, and then up into southern China and to northeast China. And that's what those arrows are basically showing. Now, from a Chinese point of view, from an American point of view, the US and Canada supporting it have been supporting the freedom of navigation of all shipping. And they claim that the Chinese have been impeding shipping, impeding the claims of neighboring countries in the South China Sea. And it's the job of the United States Navy to patrol the South China Sea and keep it free. From the Chinese point of view, this harks back to the 19th century of British, French, Japanese, and American gunboats offshore and actually up the rivers. I once met a British admiral who used to serve on a gunboat on the Yangtze River, so from their point of view, they are highly resistant to having foreign warships patrolling the South China Sea, and so it's a matter for them, China, to sort out with the neighboring countries. It's not the business of Western powers anymore. The 19th century is gone. It's turned to diversifying. And now Russia has become a big source of oil into China, and it's becoming will become a big source of natural gas into China by pipeline system, which again is probably double the length of the pipelines we have in Canada. Huge. And the first of these, which you can see there, is called the Power of Siberia. It's on the right, more or less the right-hand side of that map, and it takes gas from eastern Siberian fields down to the Chinese border, and from there the Chinese are building pipelines down the east coast. So hostile territory. I'm told in Siberia in the winter it goes down to -60 Celsius. Now they're now planning a second power of Siberia, which would go across Mongolia into northeast China. But this will come from Yamal, and you remember Yamal, we talked about that earlier. So this is how Russia can now, when this is built, it'll be about 5 years from now, I suspect, before it's finished. It's how it can bring gas to Asia, to China, as well as to Europe. So this, from a Russian point of view, is a diversification. It's also a bonding together of Russia and China, which is the new remarkable and I think unstoppable fact of life, which comes into another matter of why are we opposing these developments.
What are you hinting at? When you say, why are we opposing it?
Oh, I'll move into that. But I want to show you this one, though,
Okay.
which I hope you're not overwhelmed by too much.
No.
They're all hotspots, and there are in our newspapers for different reasons. And here's Myanmar, otherwise known as Burma.
Yeah.
And Myanmar has a natural gas field offshore, but it has a big port just on the west side of Myanmar, which is taking gas onshore, but it's also taking oil from the Middle East. So Chinese tankers, or tankers with Chinese charter, come in now, or quite a lot of them now are coming in, not all the way down the Straits of Malacca, where the US Navy could lurk and cut them off, but comes into Myanmar and then by pipeline up into southwest China. So southwest China now gets its imports of energy, of oil and gas, across Myanmar. Now, what's interesting to me is that port, which I mentioned, is exactly where the Rohingya hang out and have been uprooted or have been fleeing into Bangladesh. So it's a disturbed area, and China, of course, has been very friendly with Myanmar for obvious reasons to do with this kind of investment and much other investment to do with the Belt and Roads Initiative, which they have. And Myanmar is now, of course, in the political hairs. Is that the right word? Crosshairs?
Yeah.
Of the West. My thought is that China typically, worldwide, in dealing in its relations with other countries, takes a low profile. It takes an economic stance, and it takes a neutral stance when it comes to what kind of government it's dealing with. It takes them as they are. What it does need, and which all investors need, come to that, is stability. Now, obviously, the situation to do with the Rohingyas is the opposite. It's utterly destabilizing. The other destabilizing factor is on the Myanmar-China border. Myanmar is highly tribal, and the areas outside the main towns, as I understand it, on the periphery of Myanmar. The rule of Rangoon doesn't extend there. There's been a lot of fighting recently. There was fighting there big time, of course, in World War II, and that was the game of the British at that time, to work with the tribes to bog down the Japanese army of occupation. What I read now, I may be wrong, but I read it, is that the British again are working with the tribes to raise them up, to make for stability between the
British or the Chinese?
I'm sorry?
You said the British are working.
Yeah, the British are working with the tribes along the Chinese border, the Shan states, to make for instability in Myanmar. I read this. At any rate, I'm
sorry, I'm not following you. Why would the British be involved?
The British are involved because it was Myanmar, as Burma, was part of the British Empire.
Yeah, but now they don't give a hoot, do they?
Hmm?
Now they're not involved. Why would the British?
I think British are still highly involved in South Asia.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh.
And in talking about the pipeline, I've steered off talking about what I call petroleum resource countries, which are those four: Iraq, Libya, Iran, and Venezuela. Clearly, troublesome in the sense that Iraq, Libya were destroyed by war, by the US invasion and the NATO bombing of Libya. And in the case of Iran and Venezuela, at least sanctions in place to to make for regime change. And the sanctions heavily hit at the oil exports of those two countries. The idea is to reduce the exports of those countries of oil to zero. Of course, from a Canadian point of view, to have no oil coming out of Venezuela is wonderful, because Venezuela was the biggest supplier to the United States, to the US refineries around Houston, because they were designed to run on heavy crude oil from Venezuela, very heavy crude oil from Venezuela. And now they've switched to diluted bitumen from Alberta. So to have Venezuela shut down as an oil exporter, it has the world's biggest exports, the biggest reserves of oil of any country worldwide. Number 2 being Saudi Arabia, and number 3 being Canada, or the other way around. Anyhow, Venezuela is number 1. To have Iran shut down is also beneficial to every other country in the Persian Gulf, because it's a competitor, and it potentially could export, I don't know, 3 million barrels a day of oil. Right now, probably exporting about between half a million and 1 million, but hard to see. And the question is whether those exports will start up again because of the talks going on, the negotiations that are going on between the United States and Iran in Vienna on the nuclear deal. But I haven't focused on those countries in this talk because they're not pipelines, but they're a big deal. And where I come out matter, I guess, in all this stuff, so I put all the countries up there, it's quite a game worldwide going on. I see it, I've been looking at it from the point of view of this dimension, because I understand it somewhat, of petroleum. But of course, it goes way beyond that. Petroleum is just, it's the biggest item in world trade, the biggest commodity in world trade. There's a lot of money that goes with it, and power goes with it. And clearly, the Middle East is the world's oil center. But for me, the question is why do we have these rivalries with Russia and China? Do we need to? I happen to be of the belief that we're being led by the nose, and that they're not real enemies at all, but they're useful ones. Well, I think that Russia and China are fake enemies.
Yeah, well, they're not even pretending to be enemies anymore, are they?
Not in the least. And I don't think Russia's ever tried to be one since the Soviet Union broke up.
Yeah.
It stretched out to the West, but it was rebuffed. If Russia were part of Europe as an ordinary European country, then it would be in the balance of power within Europe. You're back to the 19th, 18th centuries again, where you have Britain, you have France, you have Germany, or you had Prussia and Austro-Hungarians, and you have Russians all playing it out in their different rivalries. This time, 4 of them have banded together in the EU. Now Britain's out of it; they're all in NATO, but they've kept Russia out because within it would be too big and too powerful. And from an American point of view, they would never tolerate that.
Okay, what the whole global image you have been painting is of the dynamics of intercountry relationships has a lot to do with the need for oil and gas and the location of the pipelines and trade routes and so on. But we know that's not going to last forever. And I understand that probably Russia and Saudi Arabia will be the last countries to lose their part of the market, because we're shifting over to renewable resources, and Canada with the bitumen production is not a rich and profitable prospect. So probably Canada will lose, as I understand it, lose its market share pretty soon. But Russia and especially Saudi Arabia last, because they can still produce at least oil, I don't know about gas, at a very competitive price. So I don't know how long this is going to last, but once that transition occurs and we have countries producing their own, mostly their own sources of energy by wind and solar, well, I guess there's still going to have to be some trade in other kinds of energy, but the whole dynamic of geopolitics will change, right?
Oh, I'm sure you're right. And I am entirely the same mind as you, that as oil, we look into the big long term, isn't it? As oil phases gradually out, the oils which are the most expensive to produce and also the worst in quality would logically be the first to be unattractive in the market and to phase out. That would be what you might expect, unless they're protected in some fashion, which I believe is the case for the diluted bitumens from Canada right now. But the international players we're in Alberta, which is a dangerous subject. The international players have been pulling out, and the international banks that have been pulling out. They've not been pulling out. Well, I have to be careful of the developments this week, but they have not been pulling out from elsewhere. Instead, as I see it, they've been putting the money into, certainly into Russia. BP has a 20% stake in Rosneft, which is Russia's largest oil company, and from that is some of the cheapest in terms of cost worldwide. So they have as these huge oil companies go worldwide, they have the cheapest oil supply. But we'll see how these things go. I see
exactly what I was about to suggest. Let's make a date for you to come back in 10 years. Let's talk about it then and see what the prospect is for global domination by anyone. Who knows going to be who on top of the world will be in 10 years from now, given the changing dynamics of energy.
I have some room in my diary. My calendar has a bit of space for them.
All right. You pencil me in. This has been fun. So, thank you so much for this. And I really look forward to our next date 10 years from now.
Thank you so much.
Bye, John. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.